made a couple of notes from what the other speakers, have been saying, and I don't want to take issue with the Vice-Chancellor of Oxford University. My father did come here, and my brother. In fact, my brother came to Oxford. None of the rest of us came to Oxford, and he was the youngest, so my father was much relieved that he did have one son that came here. Anyway, he spent 3 years in Oxford and became an accountant, and the rest of us brothers said, what a waste of an education. Not really, just in case there's some accountants in. No, I didn't want to take issue because you were saying, in poetry, that these were intentional variations of the poetic rules. I remember seeing a film called 12 Monkeys by the director Terry Gilliam. Great film. And I bumped into Terry afterwards, and he said, "What I think?" I said, "Terry, it's a fantastic film, but what about that ending? What was that ending about?" And he said to me, "Nick, I have no idea. But the lucky thing is, the critics understand it." So that just said, it was nice to hear about China. I was in China in October, and it was very nice because, as they always do in China, if you're a guest, they take you to the Great Wall. I went to the Great Wall. I looked down it. It's really long. So I had an idea. I went back, and in my final sort of speech as a guest, I said, "Look, I'm willing to be the interlocutor between Chinese government and Donald Trump, because I have good idea. Take half of your wall, give it to Donald Trump. He has good use for it in return for low tariffs on steel." I haven't had any calls. So anyway, those are just a few things that I made notes on. I am actually way out of my comfort zone on this talk because I was asked to come up with a new subject. I'm out of my comfort zone when talking about the future. But at least I'm in the company of the rest of the world because I think most people are out of their comfort zone when they talk about the future. And that's, I'm also wedded to the PowerPoint. I only really started to talk publicly at exactly the same time as the PowerPoint was introduced. And so I found I was saved. Because I had left school at 16, I wasn't used to talking to large groups of people, and the PowerPoint came along, and thank God it did. I was asked to talk for 15 minutes about the future of media and entertainment, and that's, quite a lot to do in 15 minutes. So I tried to narrow it by saying, let's just introduce the impact of technologies. And so I thought before you look forward, you should look back. This is me when I was 19 years old. I know that because it still has the date on the advert. So probably around the same age as the undergraduates in the room. I was in the entertainment business. I had the good fortune to grow up in the same village as this cross-dresser here, Richard Branson. He actually loved to wear his mother's clothes from about the age of 5 or 6. And he managed to become so successful that he was able to continue doing it. And I only use that for maybe the undergraduates in this room, and especially here in Balliol and here in Oxford, because your future is often sitting right next to you. And familiarity breeds content, and people don't know that. Now, in our business, in the film business, TV business, everything is done in groups. So people are forced, in a way, to get to know each other and to work together. But, of course, in traditional academia, you're normally in silos in terms of your studies. You join together in classrooms where you're not actually working together. I mean, you are later on. So I just say that if you are going to have the good fortune, it may be that the future is sitting right beside you now or in the next room or going to the same lunches. I'm an old hippie. May not look like it. This is, I'm just going back so we can see how we go forward. We employed hippies basically because they were cheaper. You had to accept that they didn't start work till 11 o'clock, but they worked late, they found bands, they were great. It's me, that's Richard. I don't want to be sexist, but it's just a pure fact that I remember the name of every single woman in that photograph, but only about half the men. And we were in the rock and roll business. And in fact, I only sort of mention that because back in the late 70s, yeah, at the end of the late 70s, someone came to see me and Richard who said that they could send music down a telephone line, which we were very interested in. And in fact, we announced to the press, Music Week, Capital Radio, that we were closing all of the Virgin shops. We had shops in those days across the UK, because we were now going to supply music down a telephone line. It was an April Fool's joke. Now, how do you get your music? Down the telephone line. Or indeed, not even a line now. I just thought it's worth mentioning a few of the things that I learned. Most of these are obvious things, if you can see them from the back. You know, challenging the big guys, keeping life casual, never take no for an answer, everything. They're all like straightforward things. But it's the, and I think you have every opportunity here, don't lead sheep, herd cats, is for me the central part of what we do as program makers, as content makers, or I like to use the word filmmakers, because we need cats in every group that goes out to make any kind of film. And of course to move quickly. You know, the other thing as young people that I think a lot of people lose opportunities not because they don't see them, not because they don't know their opportunities, but simply they don't move quick enough to take advantage of that opportunity, and it's there at one moment and gone the next. I love this picture. It's a picture of two bullets that collided at Gallipoli, apparently. Just looking at sort of myself in the filmmaking career, and this is they wrote a nice book about my adventures in the film business, myself and my partner Stephen Woolley's ventures, called The Egos Have Landed, which is not a good title. And I would tell you a story about Ladies in Lavender, but I don't have time, but I do want you to know the only reason I made Ladies in Lavender was because my mother told me when she hit 85 that of the films that she had seen that I had been involved in, she didn't like any of them. And it just happened to bump into an actor called Charles Dance in Berwick Street Market, who told me, I've got a story about two old women and one of them falls in love with a guy who's washed up from the sea, which would not normally have interested me. And I thought, my mum's going to love this. And I'm quite a big Catholic family. You know, I want to be in the will. So I made the film, got the rail premiere, got back in the will, my brothers are out. It's not that she's got money, it's the principle. Anybody who's got brothers will know that. And we were, so that's the past, that's me making my proposal about the Chinese wall. Well, I get to go around, the only reason I put this picture, and I'm a big football fan by the way, going to the Arsenal match tomorrow, but the reason I put that up there is simply to show off about the UK National Film and Television School. You don't have to do that in Balliol. I look at the pictures around the wall and, you know, I'm sold. But I only do that because there's a huge competition each year between all the film schools of the world. There are 3 prizes. We've won it 3 years running. 1 year, all 3 of the prizes. The other 2 years, both prizes, and coming second in the 3rd prize. So, you know, we're out there. Whenever I want to know what's happening in the world, I go to The Onion or Private Eye. But I'm going to go to The Onion because they do technology and Private Eye doesn't. And this is just a little thing. This is Vatican geneticists held a press conference to announce they've been able to clone God. There he is. And I love this one. Horrible accident happened with Facebook's algorithm, which resulted in thousands of users being exposed to new concepts. And finally, like my favourite one, is there an Uber in Oxford? I imagine there is. Anyway, they put out a new app under which you can sue them at the same time. And finally, the Onion survey. More people fear technology than death. You know, this is a quote from somebody. If anything, I'm worried that technology will extend my life. I thought it would be useful to have a look. This was a big American conference. They were looking at the future. People were making predictions in 2011, and it's fantastic. All their predictions were right, bar one. I'd be quite interested to know which of you think which of those three. Okay, media will be wearable. It is. TV will be downloaded. That's exactly what smart TVs are. Radio will evolve. It has. It was very heartwarming for us Radio 4 listeners to know that they'd added 1 million people to the Today Show in the morning. And of course, with podcasts, it's completely changed. People will be talking to ads. We've got Alexa now, and all the other similar things by the competitors. Role of data grows. I'm so sick of talking about data. Mega data, this kind of data. Whole academic disciplines have grown up around data. Ads will target networks. Well, they have, of course, user experience, number one. Always has been, always will be. All devices will interact. In theory, they do, of course. In practice, the wireless on the Great Western Rail was definitely not interacting today. So the one that, of course, is untrue here was that the global book industry would go the same way as the record industry and become completely digital. But it hasn't. And it's very reassuring, I think, in a hall like this to know that. Or some poetry that the printed word is made a real comeback. It's still in most parts of the world. 75 and indeed 80% in the English-speaking world of the books sold are print books still. And that's completely the opposite of records. So it's kind of reassuring, and there's a reason it's just easier to read a book than the other ways, the digital ways of reading. So just looking forward, this is just looking at virtual reality, a bit more serious. So, there are 5 big developments in 2016 that have really made a difference to whether virtual reality will happen. I happen to be, by the way, one of the believers that augmented reality, AR, will be far more important than virtual reality. Virtual reality, just in case anyone doesn't know, but this is Oxford, so I assume everybody knows the difference too. People know the difference here? AR, VR? I'm not going to say, they're not going to admit it. But just in case you don't, and you're quiet, VR is where you enter a world, and it's completely a imaginary world. VR is, and AR is simply where objects are invented and placed in the real world. And of course, Pokemon has been the leading kind of example last year. And through Pokemon and so on. So virtual reality has really captured the public imagination again. I'm not going to go through each of those, but the biggest one is virtual reality has begun to match actual vision. But it's really interesting that Mark Zuckerberg, who paid $2 billion for, I think it was $2 billion, for the Oculus VR headset, actually now believes that glasses will not be the future of VR and AR, and that the mobile will be that. So I'm not sure he's completely right. This is just, these are pure figures, but all they really say is that VR is not taking hold as much as people thought it would, but AR is. And there's a hell of a lot of people spending a lot of money. They think by 2021, $108 billion a year will be spent on developing AR and VR put together. So there's a lot of money going into it. Again, just a few facts and figures. I thought, I'm in Oxford, I better give you some hard knowledge. This is PwC's, they're a firm of accountants. But just a few figures in 5 years' time where we're going to be. Most of them, I think, are pretty straightforward. But 20 billion apps will be downloaded. And, all I use is Chiltern Rail. 38 million tablets. The rest, I think, they don't shock you as much, apart from, obviously, the 41 trillion megabytes of data. But the interesting thing about the consumer market, which they think will be worth 7.7 billion in the UK, is TV and video are still the leaders. Everybody thought they were going to go away, but they are actually still the biggest part of the consumer market. Funnily enough, followed by ebooks. But TV and video are still very much leading the way in terms of the content that people are devouring. I'm not going to worry about the advertising sector. In the latest big tech show in Las Vegas, one of the biggest things going on there was feelables. This was news to me, and I think news to a lot of people. A lot of companies trying to introduce feeling as well as sight and audio as the next stage of changing the way the digital world is affecting our lives. But the other uses, I'm an old rock and roll boy from the 60s, so for me, I love this idea of the virtual reality gig. You know, you go to see a band, you're in like O2 or, Wembley or whatever, the artist you like is this big, or you watch them on TV, and you might as well have stayed at home. So this virtual reality gig, you can actually be on stage with the artist, you will be there, they'll be the same size as you, so it's really an interesting use of VR. And of course, robots in the classroom. I'm sure here, being sophisticated university, you already got robots. Yeah, you're not a robot, though. No. It wasn't a robotic reading of the poetry, but it's a big thing. It's a big solution. In parts of the world where it's difficult to source teachers, especially for children and young people, here they're also questioning also what needs to be taught, but I'm kind of more of the Oxford tradition. I think the core things remain the same, throughout modern history anyway. But the use of robots, whether they be walking robots or otherwise, will make a massive difference and will be, I think, will be one of the biggest influences in the world, because the ability to bring education cheaply to those parts of the world where it's really difficult to have facilities, really difficult to have the number of teachers needed and the cost involved, because actually in the poorest parts of the world, they all pay for their education. It's not free in most of the poorer parts of the world, except in China, but it's not a poor part of the world anymore, as you just explained. I hadn't noticed it, but... for me, this is going to be a huge influence. This is one of my favourite pictures, because this is the way... The thing is, it's never one technology, the future. It's the way different technologies, often being developed for different reasons, then come together to do something that couldn't be done before. And that, at the moment, I think, is here. And that was just one example. Here's another. I'm sure Oxford is very involved in this area of developing human organs, as available human organs are becoming shorter and shorter in supply. I'm sure Van Gogh wished that he was living today and could have got himself a new ears. But we will see, again, this is going to be a huge change, not just for the modern world, but also for very much the poorer parts of the world, where the kind of care that we have is not available, but could come available cheaply and affordably to parts of the world that need it. But I still think education will be the biggest influence. I had to put this in because of the Chinese. The Chinese have developed an underwater drone so that you can watch yourself catch your fish. I think you had to be one of the richer Chinese that kind of owns developments and properties. But so just a very quick kind of summary, which to pull out of the narrowness of technology and the future and media, the other thing, this is Thomas Friedman, is that the boundaries, and we really see it now in the world, especially with Trump and Brexit, in a funny kind of way accentuates it, but the boundaries in politics, culture, technology, finance, security, ecology have really disappeared, and it's really hard to talk about one and not the other. And I think studies in universities and so on will also, they're broken down anyway, they come together, there's very much more cross-discipline going on, which just nurtures that. And my final little It's my favourite. Teen had absolutely no say in becoming part of the Snapchat generation. And of course the Snapchat algorithm is also the same kind of algorithm involved in VR. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening, being here. Cheers.